Welcome to our first episode of Spooky Mountain. My name is Steph.
And my name is Jordi, and thank you so much for joining us. This is our very first episode ever of Spooky Mountain podcast.
Yep.
Steph, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling really excited. This is really cool. We've been working on this for quite a while, so it's really exciting to finally be able to put this out there for everyone to listen to. So hopefully you guys like it. It's really exciting.
It's very exciting. We have been working on it for every day for a long time now, haven't we?
Yeah,
for weeks and weeks. It was a very spur of the moment decision from both of us, but I'm very, very glad that we're going
for sure.
with it.
Yeah. Best decision I've made in a long time. Ever. Yeah.
Okay, so just letting you guys know that this is an episode that Steph and I are very enthusiastic to begin, and we're going to be covering different topics such as UFOs, ghosts, spirits, cryptids, anything that kind of very much cryptids from Steph's end. I think we both have very different ends of the spectrum when it comes to what we're interested in, but it's really anything that falls under the paranormal umbrella, but something that we both feel like we do not want to touch upon is true crime. There's many true crime podcasts out there, and way too many, and we're not going to be one of them. So, yeah, that's just not something that we're going to be doing, just for those listening. Sorry to disappoint anyone that was maybe excited for that. But, yeah, we'll do a good job at the paranormal stuff, I think. So, just a little introduction with Steph and I. We've known each other for many years. Yeah. How many years have we known each other for?
Oh my god! Oh,
so many years. You were in high school.
I was in high school. School. So okay, we're talking over 10 years ago. Just so people get some sort of reference. Yeah. So over 10 years we've known each other.
It's a long time. But really, Steph and I got as close as what we are now because we actually shared a house here in the Blue Mountains of Australia, a very special house that's quite old and happens to be very, very haunted.
Very haunted.
I think we've both had experiences in this house, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Steph, would you say that this house is kind of like the basis or like the beginning of your interest in the paranormal, or did it kind of start before the house? Or was this kind of like the start of it all?
I guess, well, yeah, when I moved into this house, I would have been about 10 years old. So I think before I didn't really think too much about ghosts, really. It wasn't really in my agenda, but I was very much into like aliens and all that sort of thing. But pretty soon after we moved into the house, I got open to a whole new world, and it did definitely take off in that house. And I think from my whole family, I wasn't the only one.
So you definitely had some pretty like prominent experiences in this house.
Yeah, life-changing. It was really strange, just constant. Even though there was just so many little things that kept happening that you couldn't dismiss, and it was becoming incredibly uncomfortable being there. We'd have other people come into the house like yourself and have experiences as well. So it was actually pretty amazing. I was living there for probably about 15 years until I moved out, but and then moved back in with you because we rented it off my mum. So
this house has been kind of like in your family for a while, and your mum owned it, and again, like it wasn't just you who had these experiences, it was your family living there.
Right? So my family, my mum, my sisters, myself, and my best friend was living with us for a while as well. And they had a pretty interesting experience. Had a couple of other friends have things as well, and it could literally have its own episode. There's so much stuff that happened that's pretty cool and terrifying. Yeah.
I think that's definitely something for the future that we would both be interested in, is doing an episode on this house, because
100%,
even because this house it's still existing in
Yeah.
Katoomba, the Blue Mountains. So
Yeah.
there's people living in it still.
Yeah.
But
Not
even
owned by my mum anymore, unfortunately.
someone
But
else,
yeah,
yeah,
we
very
weren't sure.
unfortunately.
We were thinking, should we leave them a letter and tell them that the house is haunted? But yeah, when she sold it, she was
They
like, they'll figure out in their own time.
they probably don't need a letter.
No.
They probably already know. Like I know from like the second that I moved in, it took a while for me to have an experience in the house, but as soon as I
Mm.
moved in, I could definitely tell that there was something kind of different feeling about the house. And I've lived in like 100 different houses, and
Right. I'm
I
really
could definitely
excited to hear what
tell.
happened because, yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
know you had an experience there. That's
Yeah,
really,
I just a couple of small experiences. I don't think it's
yeah,
quite on the same level as what you experienced, but yeah,
you lived
definitely
there. Yeah.
notable. Definitely notable.
Awesome.
So,
Hmm.
would you want to touch on some experiences that you had in the house?
Yeah, well, I guess just thinking about it now, like there was a lot of the same kind of reoccurring thing that would happen to me was just seeing very dark black figures. Like I never really saw a like, the typical ghost kind of thing. It was all and it was definitely it looked like the figure of a man, just um all black. You couldn't see features or anything, but you could tell there were arms, head,
Oh my
legs.
god.
So and yeah, I've seen actually, yeah, the last time I actually saw a ghost, calling it a ghost, was actually when
Ghost,
I
yeah.
was living in that house. Which, oh my god, when was that? Like 2012,
Yeah,
13, probably.
probably about 2013. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it was about yeah, one of our friends was living there at the time, and I he got up, left for work at 7 in the morning. I got up, I was getting ready for work, and I knew he'd left. And I got up, walked out of my bedroom, and I looked to the right of me where there was a door frame, and I saw a man just walk straight past me, and I was like,
No.
yeah, and I was like, oh, is he home? I swear he just left. And then it walked behind a fireplace that we have, and then there's another door frame that's open that you can see into the kitchen. And I saw it continuing to walk through that frame, and it went straight into the sink of the kitchen. So it
Oh
actually
my
just
god,
kept
Steph.
walking, got to the sink, completely just disappeared. And I called our housemate like straight away. I was like, "Are you home? Did you?" And he's like, "I've already left for work." And I'm like, "Okay, no worries, all good." And I just remember grabbing my clothes for work. I wasn't even dressed yet, and I got dressed in the front yard.
Oh
I
my
was so
god.
scared, and I just got dressed, and
You,
I like hobbled to work, and I was like, "Yeah, tell me when you get home because I'm not going home on my own." Like,
that's terrifying. Usually I'm pretty good with. I watch scary movies. I
yeah,
watch, true paranormal investigations. But I think because I lived in this house,
mm,
I'm getting shivers. I'm getting like
yeah,
goosebumps all over my body. Like I could just, oh,
it's
because
so creepy. Yeah.
that house is also a very old house, isn't it? Like
Yeah, it's
it's
pretty
it's
old.
very,
It's like over
yeah,
100 years old, and
yeah.
yeah, it was not kept the best when my parents bought it as well. So it's kind of got this creepy vibe to it, but it's also like it's a nice little fibro cottage in this
Mm,
kind of rainforest bushy area of the Blue Mountains. It looks really beautiful. But yeah, when you spend time alone in there, you do start to feel there's a presence there. Um, yeah, you start to feel a little bit uneasy. And
yep.
for myself, I was seeing a lot of
Mm,
things. That's what I was picking
mm,
up on. One of my sisters was um, got feelings most of the time. She didn't really see too much. She would constantly just turn around
mm,
and think something was like touching her a lot of the time. My mom is a whole different ball game of that.
mm.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe she'll come on and talk about her experiences because it's not just this house for her. It's been
It's a lot of
a lifetime
places.
of things that have happened. So yeah, she's kind of brought that in. I blame her, but not really.
That's
Not really.
it's very interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, for those listening, like Steph and I have in the past, like primarily when we were living together, we have kind of touched upon our, well, it's mainly Steph's experiences in this
Yeah.
house, because I think it has, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has kind of affected you
Yeah.
in a certain
I'd say so.
way.
And people tend to know now, like now if I go to the pub and they're like, "Oh, the Katoomba house, oh, that's a creepy house," and they want to hear
Yeah.
stories, and I'm like, "Oh my god, is it
Yeah.
really that house? Like, do people really talk
Yeah.
about it?" It's a bit of a thing. I don't know.
Well, this is the thing that, like, I know from talking to other housemates that we had at the house and other people that would come by, that it wasn't just the housemates or your family that were experiencing these things
Yeah.
in the house. It was, I know, friends that came by, experienced things.
Oh, okay.
So I know that, you know, there have been a fair few people that have
Oh my
experienced some
god.
stuff in this house.
That's really cool. Well, what have you experienced as well? I guess like the house and then
So,
other things.
yeah, so starting off with the house, as I said, like, so for myself, my position on the paranormal is that I'm a believer, but I'm quite skeptical. And so if I have an experience, I will first try to explain it with other more real life, non-paranormal logic.
Yeah.
So I kind of went into the house and straight away got a very, very creepy feeling. But for me, a creepy feeling doesn't really necessarily mean shit.
Yeah.
But I just started off with a creepy feeling, so I think straight off the bat I was a little bit kind of on edge. But for me, it was always like smaller things, but just constant small things that just didn't make sense. Like, I would be laying in bed at night trying to sleep, and my door would be fully shut with the door handle locked into place, shut, and the door handle would turn and my door would open.
Oh, and I know the bedroom that you were in as
You know the
well.
bedroom.
So that was the
Yeah.
one my mum had. That
Was
she
it
had a lot
really?
of interesting experiences in that room.
Yeah.
I've slept in every room in that house, and I never wanted that room. So I'm sorry for putting you in there.
It was, well, it's the room that I wanted. So but it's funny, like, I can say all that I want, that, you know, this house is creepy. It has like a dark, because I do kind of feel like it was a bit of a dark presence, not just like a,
Yeah, there was.
you know, it was definitely a dark feeling, but there was something about this house that just drew me in. I was so sad to leave. I'm constantly thinking about this house, even before this podcast.
Yeah.
You know, it's
stuck.
always been something that's kind of been like this big, you know, part of my life. But yeah, like, other things that happened were just really, really bizarre noises, like footsteps and stuff like that. And yeah, just really kind of things that can be passed off as just like, it's just the possums in the roof.
Yeah. Oh,
you know,
yeah.
it's just the possums,
the insane amount of angry possums on the roof.
Yeah, making human-like footsteps down the hallway.
Oh.
Yeah, and just stuff like that. Like, it was, to be honest, mainly it was just the doors. The doors, like, you know, were
interesting.
opening and closing by themselves.
Wow. And have you had any other experiences, like besides ghost sightings and stuff like that?
I have. I've had, you know, a fair bit of experience with the paranormal, and I think it's because I do kind of seek it out.
Yeah.
So if I think about my most prominent paranormal experience, it was when I was about 17 years old, and I was in the house that my parents still live in now, and again in the Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
And I was there at nighttime with just my mum and my boyfriend at the time.
Yeah.
And we decided to do the Ouija board.
Oh, yeah. Real smart. Okay.
It's so smart. Yeah. Dumbass move. Oh. So we turned off all the lights and we set up some candles, and it was just like a shoddy little homemade Ouija board.
Yeah.
And we started and nothing was really happening. And then, so at the time, my mum, and still, because people don't come back from the dead, but my mum's mum had passed away.
Right.
And so we were trying to contact her, and we all had our hands, me, my mum, and my boyfriend at the time, had our hands
Mm.
on the planchette thing.
Yeah.
And it started to move pretty fast. But at the same time that it started to move, I 100% felt a hand on my hand, as if someone had
Ooh.
just placed their hand on it to move it. Like, that's what
Really?
it felt like. It was like a hand pushing my hand.
Oh my
It
God.
That was probably my first paranormal experience and my most prominent, but also because
Hmm.
about probably a minute later, not even, all the lights of the house cut out.
Oh my
At,
God. Jordy,
at,
what?
all the lights cut out at one
Did you
time.
move the house or burn it down?
I lost my shit. I literally jumped. My boyfriend at the time, he had to like catch me because I like jumped in his
Oh.
arms. We went up the road to see if we were the only ones
Yeah.
without lights, and we were the only house without
Really? The
lights.
only. Oh
Yeah.
my God. That's actually really scary.
Yeah, we're the only
Okay.
ones without lights. And it
Hmm.
didn't come on until about 4 a.m, and we just stayed awake all night
Really?
because it was
Oh,
so scary.
that's really creepy. Have
It
you
was
had
so
any
creepy.
UFO stuff? I feel like
So
that's.
I this is kind of like where my skeptic
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
part, personality comes out, because I think that I have seen some stuff, but when it comes down to lights and that kind of thing,
I agree.
I especially when it's nighttime, it's like,
Yeah.
is that something, or is it just a helicopter or a
It's very
plane or
hard.
something?
Yeah. UFOs,
Yeah,
I feel
like,
like, is the hardest topic to kind of really
be
explain to someone about a
yeah.
sighting. It's.
Yeah, and I think it like the criticism
Mm.
on that aspect of the paranormal is quite harsh also. It's like, yeah, it could just be a drone, it could just be a plane or something, but
Weather balloon.
a weather balloon.
Yeah.
But I know, we're both originally from the Blue Mountains, and there
Mm.
has been some very, very like strange stuff reported in the
Yeah,
mountains.
for
So,
sure.
have you had a UFO experience?
No, I haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll straight up say one time I was like, oh, and then I'm writing it off. I wish I could have a UFO experience. I would definitely say the ghost ones. I could not. I honestly wouldn't be able to tell you how many I've had. It's very strange.
Would
Um,
you say that all your ghost experiences have been in the house, or has there been some outside of the house?
The only other time I've experienced something twice was when I was working at a hotel in the Blue Mountains, the Lilienfels Hotel, which is
Yes.
haunted because
Yes.
it's named after Lillian, who was the daughter of the guy who built it, or some shit like that. I don't really understand. But
Yeah.
anyway, I had two experiences there, but that was it.
Mm.
The house mainly, then the hotel. When I was really young, probably the very first thing that I ever had happen to me, um, which is actually crazy because I remember it so clearly. I was about 6 years old, and I was living currently at the time in Campbelltown before we moved up to the mountains, and I was asleep in my bed, and I astro traveled. Like
Oh, yes. This is
like
another aspect that I feel like kind of
It
fits
I
under that
don't
paranormal
yeah,
umbrella.
like, I don't even know where that goes, but
Yep.
I remember it
Mm.
so clearly. I remember just
Yep.
getting up, getting out of my
Yep.
bed, but I remember my feet wouldn't touch the floor, and I wasn't bothered. I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I'd say it was probably about a foot off the ground. And I remember I could kind of just like stretch out and just kind of like slide like in the air, and I went into my parents' bedroom. They were asleep. And I went out the house and I was up and down the road. Like, it was
Oh
crazy.
my god, are
Yeah.
you for
Yeah.
real?
And I was literally just moving around on the road, and then
This is
there was no one on the
wild.
road. It was in the middle of the night, and I was just by myself. And then I went back to bed, and I remember when I got up, I remembered it. I was like, oh my God, that was so cool. And I expected it to happen again because I was so young. And I woke up and my feet just touched the floor normally. And I was like, that's so weird. Oh, and
Wow.
I will forever remember that feeling so strongly of
Yep.
going to put my feet off the edge of the bed, and it just bounced back like it was like a sponge, like it just wouldn't let
Wow.
me touch the floor. It was
You
really
know,
cool.
That's so interesting to think about because you had this experience as a kid, and it's like, what causes a person to astro travel? It's like,
Yeah. I had
it's
no
not
idea.
some enlightened nirvana state that you are able
Oh,
to get to because you're a kid.
yeah.
Like, it's not like you tried to make this happen. Like, what causes this to happen? You
Yeah.
actually just reminded me of a really terrifying experience that I had.
Oh.
Sorry to quickly
No,
change
go for it.
from what you were saying, but I was living in Canada at the time, and I was having a daytime nap next to my boyfriend that I was living with. And I don't know if you'd classify this as astro traveling or what the fuck it was, but basically I was having a nap and I was asleep. But then I kind of, what I thought was, I thought I woke up,
Right.
but then I started to float above my body.
Right.
And then I kind of turned around to look down at my body, and this is the truly terrifying part. I looked down at my body, and my face looked like, the victims from like, it's like The Ring or The Grudge or something.
Wait, what?
And their mouths are open. And
oh,
their
Jordi,
faces
don't.
are like,
Are you serious?
yes, and their faces are contorted. My face was contorted, and I had blood coming from my eyes.
Wait, what is happening? What is going on?
I don't know. Is this astro traveling? Am I just dreaming?
That
I don't know.
is terrifying.
I don't know.
And
it's terrifying.
So, okay, so you're on top of your body, and you're seeing that. What happens? Do you go anywhere, or do you
no
black out? I don't know.
I'm just floating above my body, and so what happened was I screamed, and when I screamed, I snapped
woke
back
you up.
awake.
That is hectic.
Yeah, and so I remember before this happening, I kept on having. It was like, and this has happened a few times to me, and I don't know what it is. I was like dreaming. I was having a dream about something, and then in my dream, it was almost like I couldn't walk properly. I was really disorientated. My legs weren't working. And then I'd wake up and be like, oh, that was just a dream. And then it would be really hard to walk again. And then I'd realize, oh, no, I'm still in a dream. And it was almost like, what's the movie? Inception. It was almost like Inception. I just kept on waking up into dreams. And then that's when I was like, oh, I'm awake now. And I started floating above my body. And then I saw myself.
I mean, I don't even. That's crazy. I mean,
a lot.
To even think about when I say I astro traveled, but like, I didn't even. Yeah. I can't even remember myself looking at my body. Like I don't even know if I. Like I just naturally got up, like I was getting out of bed, but I didn't. I don't even acknowledge myself laying there at all. I think I was just
went for
too
a walk.
young. Yeah, I was just going for a little midnight stroll down the street in Campbelltown, which is like totally not dangerous as a 6-year-old.
Wow, that is so bizarre. It really makes me think that there's some kind of crossover between our sleeping state, the dream world, and the paranormal. Yeah. Because there's also the aspect of paralysis, like sleep paralysis, that I really feel like does tie into the paranormal. I don't know how.
I feel like it does too. I mean, I've never personally experienced anything, but hearing other people's stories is really terrifying.
It's terrifying. And you know what? This boyfriend that I was sleeping next to when I had my out-of-body astral travel thing, he has he gets sleep paralysis. Our housemate at the time also suffered from sleep paralysis. And so for those who don't know, when you get sleep paralysis, you can sometimes experience like hallucinations, but you're awake. And a lot of the time they're very terrifying. These two people experienced the same female hallucination. The same woman would come to both people.
More than once.
Yeah, more than once. Wow. And it's the same person visiting different people when they're in sleep paralysis. It's the same like demon lady that they saw. Both these people saw her in their sleep paralysis state.
Yuck. Yeah. I don't like that.
There's something to it. So, should we get started on what our podcast is really about? So how we do things around these parts is that Steph and myself will have a story or sometimes even 2 stories if we're
Mm-hmm.
feeling enthusiastic,
Yep.
each episode. And we tell each other our stories. These are
Yep.
real life stories that have happened that we've researched and put a lot of time into.
So my one is a story that dates back to March 1974 in Fort George Island, Florida. And it's about a strange object that was found by the Betz family. This was a very respectable family, well known in the community and pretty well educated. The mother, Jerry Betz. So she was the president of a real estate and land development company. She ran for state representative in 1972. The father, Antoine, he was a marine engineer. They had about 6 kids together as well. And currently, at the time during this experience, their eldest son, Terry, is 21. So, yeah, it's pretty much a story about Jerry, Antoine, and Terry and what they experience. So the Betzes had moved into a large 7-story, 21-room Tudor-style mansion. It is the most incredible house. It's it has its own history itself. That house is incredible. So they moved into this mansion in Florida, 1967. It's located near this coastal marshland. The property was around 88 acres. It was massive. Tropical shrubs, large, moss-shaped draped trees. It was tropical, swampy Florida paradise home. So yeah, it was actually a really cool house. They called it a castle themselves because it looked really castle-y, but weird. um, so all the high strangeness begins with a wildfire in some dry grass just off their property. One day, Jerry, Antoine, and their son Terry went out there together to inspect the damage. So this is when Terry, the son, he discovers this sphere. And it's near the fire, but it did not appear to have caused the fire. So what was laying down in the grass was a shiny, smooth, metallic ball. It was about a bowling ball size, just over 9 kilos in weight, and it was just sitting there. There was no indentations to say it was dropped from a height or rolled from somewhere else. There's a couple of small scratches on there, nothing too major, but it did have a very small imprinted triangle on it. It looked like it was stamped on it. So, yeah, it didn't bust into the ball at all. But overall, it was just a very large, shiny metal ball. So the family thought it was space junk, because during this time in the 70s in the media, space and NASA were all over the place. Did the metal ball heat up upon entry and make the fire? There was no burns near it. It wasn't hot to the touch either. And there was no markings or indentations to show that it had anything to do with the fire. So maybe it's just an old cannonball, or maybe something just decorative, they thought. So Terry, being 21, thought this was really fascinating and wanted to take it home as a souvenir. He puts it away on his bay window seat in his bedroom. A week or two later, Terry started to play his electric guitar. So he had his friend over, they were just jamming out in their room, and the ball started to vibrate like it came alive. It started to resonate like a tuning fork, they said. Shortly after, the family said the ball would emit a high-frequency noise that the dog could only hear, and they would often see their dog covering its ears and whimpering, but they couldn't hear anything. The ball would roll by itself on the floor, it would stop, it would vibrate, and then it would change direction. One time it rolled continuously on its own for 12 minutes. The family became so obsessed and experimented with it all the time, playing records near it, sitting down on the ground, rolling it to each other, watching it change directions all the time, just playing around with it as you would. It's pretty damn interesting. Jerry, the mum, placed it on their table one day and watched it navigate its way around the perimeter without falling off. So it just moved around on its own. They kept wondering, is it being directed by an outside force, or is it even controlling itself? Jerry stated that if you shake it, you can hear something inside. She thought there were 3 or 4 smaller balls inside that would move around. There were no seams or welding marks on the ball to explain how this could even be made. Quote, if you pick up the sphere and hold it over your head and shake it vigorously and then put it down, it has a motion inside. It almost feels like it's trying to get away from you. It actually feels like a huge Mexican jumping bean, Jerry told reporters. Sunlight made it more active, like it was solar powered. During cloudy days and nights, it was still active but more dormant. Occasionally, the ball would vibrate at a low frequency. Terry started conducting his own experiments, also by tapping on it with a hammer. It would give off a ringing sound. And for another experiment, they tilted their table, then placed the ball on the table, only to see the ball defy gravity and move itself up the slope on its own. Oh, and at night, the family would actually put the ball in a duffel bag to stop it from moving all over the place at night time because it was driving them so crazy. They just zip it up, keep it there. Other strange occurrences started happening within the home once the ball appeared. Doors started slamming themselves around the house. They started to hear disembodied voices. And also a mysterious organ music filled their residence, even though they didn't have an organ. So finally, the Betzes had had enough and contacted the newspapers in hope that someone might be able to tell them what this bizarre artifact was. The Jackson Journal sent a photographer, Lou Wegner, to visit the residence. He made it clear he was extremely skeptical. Quote, you're not going to believe this till you see it, Jerry said, and then placed the metal ball on the ground. Quote, it rolled a ways, then stopped. So what, she said. Just wait a minute. It turned by itself and rolled to the right about 4 feet. Then it stopped. It turned again and rolled to the left about 8 feet, made a big arc and came right back to my feet. After this article was released, there was a media frenzy. Carl Wilson, from a holistic institute in Baton Rouge, examined the ball for 6 hours in their home. He reported that he found radio waves emitting from it and a magnetic field around it. The following excerpt is from the article The Betz Sphere by Skeptoid. Quote, some authors also following the assumption that it fell from outer space suggested that it was Sputnik or a Sputnik-light satellite. This was largely based on what Carl Wilson had said, and it transmitted a radio signal. But the ball was a poor match for Sputnik. It had no antennae, seams, rivets, mechanical connections, or anything else that categorized Sputnik's globe. Dr. James Harder, a professor of fluid mechanics engineering at the University of California, had also examined the ball. The X-rays showed that the shell was made of iron-chromium alloy and 1/2 inch thick. The center of the ball was made of uranium. He ended his conclusion saying it was a small UFO. Even the Navy wanted to get their hands on the sphere. Jerry wrote up a contract advising that they had 2 weeks to do their investigations, then they would have to return it straight back to her, even if it turned out not to be government property. A Navy spokesman said to the St. Petersburg Times that the Navy's first X-ray attempts failed because its machine wasn't strong enough to penetrate the steel, but 2 subsequent tests showed the contents of the globe. I don't know who manufactured it, said the spokesman. But it did come from Earth. We do know it's not an explosive, and it presents no hazard. The Navy spokesman stated after the investigation that it was not their property, made of stainless steel. However, they couldn't determine what it was used for, but it was certainly constructed on Earth. They said the ball would move around because of the small triangular chip in the surface as it threw off the balance. Quote, I believe it's because of the construction of the house. It's old and has uneven stone floors. The ball is almost perfectly balanced, and it only takes just a little indentation to make it move or change direction. A short time later, the National Enquirer was hosting a panel of 5 UFO investigators in New Orleans. One of the panelists was J. Allen Hynek. And if you don't know who he is, he's commonly known for the scientific research he did for Project Blue Book. He also was the one to develop the term close encounter. So he was among the few people to conduct the scientific analysis of reports and of trace evidence left by UFOs. So the inquirer ended up flying Terry Betz to the conference so the panel could investigate the sphere. The panelists all seemed to be quite unimpressed with the metallic object and ended up having the same conclusions as the Navy. The following is another part of the Skeptoid article. Quote, the Palm Beach Post reported on the 18th of April that Lottie Robinson recognized the ball from the pictures, then went and got her own out of the garage where it had sat with her for 15 years. Technicians from the St. Regis Company paper mill identified it as a ball check valve from some large pipes that was used in their factory, and that had been scrapped 15 years before. Somehow that ball had found its way from a scrap dealer to Mrs. Robinson's son, and from there to her garage. It was very close, but not identical in size, and weighed about the same as the Betz Sphere. The Betz story even has an elegant thread that ties it full circle, which is not something we always find on Skeptoid. How the ball came to be on Fort George Island in the first place. After the story broke, a Coca-Cola delivery man saw some similar-looking spheres in a sculpture outside the hotel managed by artist James Sterling Jones in New Mexico. He called Jones' attention to the newspaper stories about the Betz Sphere. Soon, reporters were calling him to ask how much his 8-inch stainless steel globes. They wanted to know all about it. It turns out he had several sculptures that used them, including a kinetic sculpture using one as a pendulum. He'd made a run a few years back in his Volkswagen bus, collecting scrap metal for his sculptures. A friend had supplied him with a number of balls from large industrial ball check valves at his company in two sizes, some 8-inch weighing about 22 pounds and some 10-inch balls around 70 pounds. Having no more room left inside his VW, he actually put the balls on a luggage rack up the top of the car and he drove from Jacksonville all around. In 1971, he said a few balls actually flew off the luggage rack and were lost. And he's saying that, they sat there for 3 years until the Betzes came along it. And, Sterling Jones even explained the rattle noted by Hynek. Quote, the rattle comes from trying to patch the sphere. The company drills the spheres and re-welds them before matching them up again. Sometimes some of the milling or drilling chips drop inside. Was this truly evidence of a UFO, or did the family really have possession of a metallic sphere used inside a check valve? Unfortunately, wherever the sphere was will remain unknown, as the Betz family, they've actually hidden it in an undisclosed location due to constantly being being contacted by conspiracy theorists. So, the story lives on for another 40 years and no one knows what's going on with this ball or where it is. But that's my little story.
Wow, that is super interesting. I have a lot of thoughts listening to this story. I think maybe a long time ago, I have heard of this, but not in so much detail. The very first thing that I wrote down, and I don't know, some people might think that I'm a shit person for thinking this, but I kind of feel like, the wife was a state rep, right? And the husband was a Marine. And I kind of feel like when it comes down to like paranormal stories and experiences, people who are like cops, the military, firefighters or whatever, if they, or like, pilots or whatever, people who are in like government positions, I feel like I'm going to trust their stories a bit more, not because I have more trust in them, but from my experience of those types of people, they're quite staunch and no bullshit. And
they don't want to ruin their reputation.
No, exactly. They don't want to ruin their reputation. They've usually seen some shit which hardens them a bit, makes them more callous. But, state rep and a Marine, it's pretty reliable. Like, I fully acknowledge, like,
Yeah.
I'm none of those things, and I've had paranormal experiences,
Yeah.
and I would want someone to believe what I'm saying.
And they
But
had
I
a
feel
lot of
like
money as well, just to note. Like, they weren't trying to get money out of it. They were a very wealthy family.
no,
They bought a
they weren't
mansion.
gaining
Like,
something from it.
yeah,
That's
they were
another
getting
huge
nothing.
aspect, I think,
Yeah.
is that, like, got to look at the money aspect. Are they going to get rich from
Mhm.
this? Yeah, that's a very interesting
Yeah. I thought it was just a
story.
bit of a weird one. Yeah.
I kind of feel like it definitely has the potential of, like, with the okay, this is something else that I really like, is when, like, science and paranormal has a crossover.
Yeah.
So there's, like, scientific testing on something that's, like,
Yeah.
potentially paranormal, or, like,
Same here.
not able to be explained, because that kind of legitimizes.
Yeah, they're trying to get answers. They're going to all the
Yep.
top people they can to try and figure out what is going
What
on.
it is,
And it's weird because there's so many different outcomes. It's like, who even cares anymore? Like,
exactly. And that's the thing, is, like, did they test it and they did find something, and they're kind of, like, hiding some kind of results from it. And I also believe that the, like, construction of the house, like the whole house part of it, is just bullshit. Like,
yeah, with
obviously
the
that's
Navy.
not. Yeah, like, that's
Crooked
not what
floors.
it's just a bump in the floorboard. That's what it is. That's what the vibrating is.
That made me, yeah. And the way what I imagine holding, if I was to hold it, it kind of sounds, those, I don't know, it was like a real thing in the 90s. Everyone kind of had them. They're like those 3 balls in a case, and they're like meditation balls, and you can, like, roll them in your hand, and they got this weird, like, chimey noise.
Yes.
And you would, like, roll them like metal. They were really
Zen
heavy.
balls. Is that what they're called? Zen balls.
Think maybe, I don't know,
something, or meditation balls or something like that.
Yeah, something. Yeah, and they'll, like, chime if you, and you can kind of feel something inside. That's kind of what I'm imagining, but, like, on a larger scale.
This is exactly what I'm imagining. I wrote down also, like, I can feel what the moving feels like, and this is exactly what I'm imagining. It's like that. You move a ball in your hand, and you can kind of feel movement within the sphere within the ball. You can feel it, kind of that, like, movement in it. Oh, how interesting!
It's a cool
That's a very good.
I've had that one for a while. I was like, oh no, it's pretty cool. It's not scary or spooky, but it's just like a really interesting kind of thing.
It's quite lighthearted. I do really like that, and I love, like, scientific or government involvement.
Oh yeah.
Not that I fully trust that I don't want to seem like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but
I think most of us are on the same page with that. So yeah.
Yeah, that's like, I'm sure it's in their best interest to not say some stuff about what they know, but, like, I love science investigating and paranormal stuff, and government kind of snatching things away from people, and it's
I've definitely got more of that. So
yeah.
But what are you going to talk about?
So mine is about 1000% darker than what yours is. Just to bring another feeling to our stories. So my story is set in this country, Australia. So I'll begin. Port Arthur, not only one of the most notoriously haunted locations in Australia, but the place that has been dubbed Australia's most haunted location. And it's not only the hauntings that make this site extremely dark, oppressive, and bleak. Port Arthur, as a penal colony and also convict settlement, witnessed many executions, murders, tortures, neglect, and so much more sadness in old and also modern times. Just some quick history of the location. Port Arthur is currently a small, sleepy town with a population of only 250 people. So that was I think it was the 2016 census. It was 250 people, and I can't imagine too many more would be living there since then. And it is also a former convict settlement and penal colony in Tasmania, Australia. The location forms part of the official Australian convict sites, a World Heritage property consisting of 11 remnant penal sites originally built within the British Empire during the 18th and 19th centuries. For those who don't know what a penal colony is, it is a settlement used to exile prisoners and separate them from general populations, etc., etc. So it's usually quite isolated, away from life as they would know it. The penal colony of Port Arthur was reserved for the absolute hardened of convicts, the ones who were deemed the most dangerous and reckless, and also reoffending convicts, so the convicts who were known to be trouble. Port Arthur existed as a penal colony from 1833 until 1853. In addition, Port Arthur had some of the strictest security measures of the British penal system in all of Australia. Existing as a prison with tight security as opposed to other convict settlements that were in other parts of the country, this prison system involved not just horrific physical punishment, but even more so very severe psychological punishment. This is something that they almost prided themselves on, was the fact that they were using more psychological punishment and torture as opposed to physical. Prisoners were subjected to what was called the silent system, which meant that the prisoners were hooded and forced to remain totally silent while in the prison, something that was thought to allow the prisoners to reflect on what brought them there in the first place. And this view of this type of punishment was seen to be almost wholesome or spiritual, but really it did quite the opposite to the prisoners. Many of the prisoners developed extremely severe mental illnesses due to this, undoubtedly leading to the asylum that was built attached to the prison a few years later. So because so many people just really suffered from such severe mental illness, they had to build an asylum attached to the prison. Unfortunately, records show that among the population of Port Arthur's prisoners were also juvenile prisoners, some as young as the age of 9. This location would be traumatizing, to say the least, for an adult, let alone a child that has just been ripped away from his family, forced to undergo the backbreaking labour that was forced upon them at Port Arthur, such as stone cutting or coal mining or building construction. Okay, there was absolutely no escape from Port Arthur. None. It is totally surrounded by shark-infested waters. And during the time of the colony, a bird's nest watchtower was manned 24 hours a day by soldiers, as well as being guarded by half-starved dogs that would take any opportunity for a bite of any kind of meat. There was absolutely no contact with the outside world at all, not even with other convicts or family that had been placed in other parts of Australia. It's total isolation. For all who were imprisoned at Port Arthur, happiness was simply futile. Many took their own lives to escape the hostility and the isolation. Others simply could not handle the constant sensory deprivation that they experienced and revolted by taking the lives of others. There are reportedly 1,646 graves on the island, with only 180 being marked. The rest are unmarked and mass graves. Again, this includes the children who were imprisoned in Port Arthur, who passed away from starvation and exhaustion from only being fed bread and water while being forced to work so heavily. Port Arthur was almost literally a death sentence for those who were doomed to be sent to the penal colony. The unfortunate history of Port Arthur didn't end when the prison closed in 1877. In April of 1966, the town was the scene of the Port Arthur Massacre, the worst mass murder event in post-colonial Australian history. A mass shooting by Martin Bryant, who killed 35 children, women, and men, and wounded 23 others. This has permanently left a wound on the sleepy, close-knit town, a scar that will never heal. The thrashing sound of cat o' nine tails and piercing screams of convict lunatics are long forgotten, and chirping birds and storytellers have taken their place, or so we think. Even if you are not so inclined to believe in the paranormal, ghosts, or the spirit world, I think we can all agree that Port Arthur is a place of unimaginable darkness, sadness, and eeriness. If you are a believer of such things, there is much proof here that would lead you to believe that Port Arthur would be a location of trapped souls damned by the tragedy of their fate. Torture, neglect, unmarked graves, isolation are these contributing factors that have led to almost 2,000 reports of paranormal experiences that span from poltergeist activity, disembodied voices, full body apparitions, people being poked, grabbed, and thrown in Port Arthur. As early as 1870, we see the very first recording of a paranormal sighting. So this is a long time ago. Ironically, this first sighting is the same year that Reverend George Eastman, who was apparently a very tall and terrifying man who preached in fire and brimstone, dies in the parsonage, one of the most iconic buildings in Port Arthur. His the first recording of this supernatural experience is actually only a few months after his death. It's believed that the ghost of Reverend George was first seen by Reverend Haywood, who was the replacement of George Eastman when Eastman died at an early death at the age of 48 from a fatal chill. Apparently, that's a thing back in the day. You just die from a chill. All reverends who lived with their families on the Van Diemen's Land, or what is known as Tasmania today, would set up residence in the parsonage in Port Arthur. From the very beginning of their residence in the parsonage, everyone in the Haywood family, including Reverend Haywood, thought the house was haunted. Everyone in the family except for Mrs. Haywood, his wife. Determined to expel such myths, she made a trap one night after the children went to bed. Mrs. Haywood tied threads across the staircase from top to bottom and waited several hours, hearing nothing. As soon as she went to bed, Mrs. Haywood heard strange movement downstairs. She woke her husband and they checked the staircase, where every piece of string had snapped apart from one at the very top. The Haywoods saw nothing at the time, but allegedly felt a breath of hot air before hearing footsteps quickly descend the staircase after checking the thread. The Reverend, his wife, and their children, a family who highly considered themselves as dedicated servants of their God, reported that they would witness coloured flashing lights or floating lights and orbs throughout the parsonage, which is still a very common sighting to this day when tourists and tour guides make their way through the residence, particularly within the bedroom that Eastman died in. And also in this bedroom, it's something that is recorded often, very often, is a rotting flesh smell in the room that he died in. The bedroom is located on the left side of the second story, the same area that tour guides and maintenance workers have heard hurried footsteps rushing up and down the stairway throughout the night. There has even been a report from a group of contractors who were staying in the parsonage. One night, the apprentice was found wide awake, flailing, having trouble breathing. It took the two other men to pick him up as he was pinned to the bed. Once he recovered, he explained he felt a very heavy weight on his chest, and upon opening his eyes, he saw a man with a beard telling him to leave his house and never return. All the contractors left the building and refused to enter ever again. Big, tough men. Another recurring experience within this particular building is giggling and chatting of what sounds like a little girl. Even full apparitions of a girl around the age of 6 has been seen running through the hallway and then just simply disappearing into a wall. Some believe that this is a spirit of a girl who attended a school that once belonged on the island. Others think that it's a more sinister being that is pretending to have the innocence of a child to lure people under its influence. Despite the parsonage being the first and most well-known haunted building in the old penal colony, it is not the most notorious part of the land that is most haunted. The building, threateningly named the Separate Prison, is probably the most intimidating building within Port Arthur. Even its construction was purposefully created to instill fear and mystery into the hearts of the convicts. That fear and mystery still lingers today, and the feeling of dread still overcomes people when they enter the Separate Prison. This is where the jail utilised the solitary and sensory deprivation system, a reason that many people think has caused this area to be so spiritually active. This is where the prisoners were physically and mentally isolated from others for all hours of the day and night, with a lot of the time just sending men and sadly children as well insane. Being scratched, choked, pushed and grabbed is just a few repeatedly reported occurrences, though what is more so recorded is that as soon as you step foot into the building, you feel a sense of overwhelming sadness and despair that doesn't lift until you leave. Such intense sadness and emotion that many have broken out in tears, sobbing in the middle of the tour. One man was so overcome by his emotion that he was found curled into a fetal position, laying on the floor, unable to communicate, and had to be carried out by his fellow tour members. One employee remembers that one night in the middle of a tour that she was giving a brief history of the building when a man in front of her clutched at his throat as if someone was holding him by the neck. When he was finally able to let go and move his hands, the whole group witnessed 3 scratch marks slowly appear on the same area in front of their eyes on his neck. The whole area then began to welt around the scratch marks, and the man said that it felt like he was being physically choked by a strong hand. Another extremely spiritually prominent building in Port Arthur that seems to always create a consistent and similar paranormal experience is the dissection room, which is the limestone basement underneath the senior surgeon's residence, which still houses a limestone autopsy table in the middle of the room, which is super creepy. It is reported time and time again that after entering into the cold and dark basement, you can clearly smell the distinguishable chemical odor of embalming fluid. This spot is where hundreds of former inmates were opened up and examined after they were finally able to physically rest from a long span of years in the mental and physical torture of Port Arthur Penal Colony. There have been many full-bodied apparitions seen here, including a man who has on multiple occasions appeared to lean forward out of a hole in the wall to peer around the tour group who are conducting a paranormal investigation in the room, only to lean back and disappear into the same wall. This hole was where the servants used to scrape the ashes from the fireplace down into the dissection room to soak up the blood from the dissected bodies. Multiple people have passed out, and almost constantly there are malfunctions of phones, cameras, torches, and other electronic devices. Not to mention that people time and time again, seemingly out of nowhere, blacking out in this room, as well as others feeling intense pains shoot through certain areas of their body just randomly. There are a few other notable buildings that are notorious for housing well-known spirits or sinister beings, including the Commandant's residence, the asylum attached to the prison, as well as the church grounds where one convict randomly and viciously killed another with a pickaxe. Though what I find most interesting is that the grounds seem to be swarming with the spirits of children. Records show that after Port Arthur was abandoned as a penal colony, the buildings were used as schoolhouses. The ghosts of children are seen and heard nearly everywhere on the land, and they have also been photographed numerous times sitting in windows, in doorways, in the gardens, and more. But worst of all are the sounds of painful cries coming from Point Pure, the prison built specifically for boys, for little boys. At one point, it held 3,000 young prisoners, some as young as 9 years old. Explorers who visit at night find the halls filled with the sounds of dread. It's said that the cries of one boy are clearly heard. He laments remorsefully as he is led to his own execution. Out of all the sightings and experiences within the dark and eerie Port Arthur, the most common occurrence by far is the sighting of the Lady Blue. The Lady Blue is a young woman who reportedly was married to the accountant of Port Arthur during the times of the penal colony. Her and her baby sadly died during childbirth. Legend has it that she wanders around the grounds searching for her child, who was buried separate to her body due to the child not being baptized. So the child was built on unconsecrated land. People have allegedly seen her appear and reach out to people in the church's bell tower before vanishing. Children seem to be magnetized to her, with reports of kids even running up to a person invisible with their arms stretched out as if expecting to be picked up. There are so many more stories and sightings than what I've told here of Port Arthur, but I think you could never tell all the experiences in one lifetime. There are so many. There are so many experiences of this location. Port Arthur seems to be a place that you don't just witness, but you truly just have to feel.
Jordi, that was really good. That's so much darker than mine. I love
It's dark. It's a very
the complete
dark
different
story.
end of the spectrum. It's really interesting because I wasn't sure which way you were going to go into with the Port Arthur, because for me, when I think of Port Arthur as an Australian, I just think of the mass murder. But
The massacre.
I never really, I never knew too much about the actual history of it, and that's terrifying.
No.
I want to go there in a weird.
It seems very, very interesting. Like, I was the same. I had really only heard of like the massacre, because if by any chance there's someone listening who isn't Australian, the massacre at Port Arthur that happened in the 90s was the reason that Australia brought in gun control. So it's a very well known, like incident, like massacre, murder that happened in the country. It's very well known, and so I think that does overshadow the whole penal colony history a little bit, but it's just darkness. Like, the whole area is just super dark.
Yeah, who knew it could get worse with darker, what's already happened.
Much darker.
I was pretty. I couldn't believe that. When you were telling me about just the amount of unmarked graves as well. I'm like, wow, that is so haunted. The amount of children that have been there, like the torture that they went through, wearing the hoods in the cells, that freaked me out heaps. That's I mean, it's
really horrible.
Yeah, I mean, you've definitely intrigued me with that one. I definitely want to delve deeper into that and kind of I haven't heard anything about
there's
that.
There's so much more than what I kind of told as well. Like, with especially with the whole like sensory deprivation thing. Like, this was their whole shtick. This is like a thing that they thought was going to revolutionize like prison systems. They kept these hoods on these prisoners. They weren't allowed to use the names of any prisoners, just to kind of like break them down a bit further. No talking at all. These prisoners were also like forced to attend church, I think like every day, but they weren't allowed to say a word.
That would
also
you up.
And like, this is every single day. This isn't just like a one-off solitary confinement type thing. So every single day. And the building that they were kept in was built specifically to make them feel isolated. The corners and hallways and the rooms were built to make the prisoners
Wow.
feel even more like sensory deprived and
Mhm.
isolated. So
Wow.
it's a very, very dark place.
Yeah. All right. Oh,
It's very
cool.
interesting.
Yeah. I love
Yeah. So
it.
that's how both different ends of the spectrum in lots
Yeah.
of different ways with our stories this week.
Yeah.
A bit more
Awesome.
lighthearted, a bit more dark, and kind of UFO-y, and then
Yeah,
the
I think we're
ghost
definitely going to
world.
touch on all of the above. Yeah, I hope you guys really liked the story. Sorry if we sounded a little bit nervous and a bit weird, but yeah, we're working on it. But yeah, it was really fun. Hope you guys enjoyed listening. And Jordy, do you want to let them know where they can find us?
Yeah, so we're on social media all across the board. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube. Our social media handle is Spooky Mountain Podcast, and that's on Instagram, the Facebook group, and YouTube. So if you did want to contact us, you can reach out to us on any of those platforms. Our episodes are going to be uploaded each week to YouTube with some really cool
Mm-hmm.
visuals that our amazing Steph has created herself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's also going to include captions if you just so happen to need to use captions as well. So yeah, it's going to be everywhere.
Yeah. Twitch as well, which is a bit of, we've got that there already with the name Taken. We do a bit of gaming ourselves, both of us. So one day we'll be on there and it'll be a cool way to talk to you guys as well.
Yeah, maybe one day we could do like creepy
We got to do Slender
gaming
Man.
twitching.
I mean, that game is
Yeah.
terrifying. I mean, there's a lot we could do. So I think that would be a really fun
Yep.
thing to do.
Yeah, but thanks so much everyone for listening. It's been so much fun to record our very first Spooky Mountain podcast, and we really look forward to having you here again.
Yeah, let us know what you think. All right.
Bye. This episode of Spooky Mountain was created and recorded on land of the original custodians, the Gundungurra and Bidjigal people. We pay respects to the past, present, and emerging mob. My name is Jordi, and I'm a proud Gunya woman. Thank you for listening.